What is up? I'm Miguel Antonio, and you are listening to the Live and Create podcast. It's where I interview artists and entrepreneurs about what it means to live a great life and create great things. And before we jump into the podcast today, I'd love for you to check out my band, Run With It. Here's a clip from our song, At Least You Tried.
But what if your book has not been written? What if you have one more song left? What if you have what it takes at the bottom of the well? What if you have what's been missing? What if there's someone who needs those words, needs your melody? Dig down deep. What will the others say? They say, God damn, at least you tried. At least you tried. What will the others say? They say, God damn, at least you tried. At least you tried.
If you like what you heard, make sure you check us out at Run With It Band, at Run With It Band, everywhere you follow people at, or go to runwithitband.net. It'll take you to all the different links you want to go to, and there'll be a little button you can click for booking information. Now for today's podcast.
The Live and Create podcast.
Now, I saw you had an education degree. Are you teaching music as well, or focused just right now on your performance career? What does that look like for you?
So as of right now, I was a teacher, but then I left the classrooms to kind of start looking into something else. More so because I was like, I didn't feel I could be as creative as I am right now, working for X amount of hours and coming home with work
Right.
that you still have to do. And I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's tough. I think that's something I've literally heard people make an argument for teachers where they're like, why do we have to pay them more? Because they're done at 3, they get summers off. It's like, you apparently don't know teachers. Like, they're not done at 3, bro.
No, the work continues even after you're clocked out. So it's
Yeah.
like, ugh.
Well, so when did you step into just going full-time after you're performing?
I would say in 2023, that's when I really kind of wanted to take my first step in going. Well,
Yeah.
actually, no, let me fix that. I think it was 2024. That's when I really started
Gotcha.
going into the whole performance aspect. Because I know I dropped music in 23, like
Oh.
just one simple song. And then
Okay.
once 2024 hit, I was kind of like, all right, let's start stepping into what I got.
You're like, it's time to go.
Exactly.
For a split second when you said drop music, I was like, no, you quit music? But then I caught up with you. You dropped a song.
Yeah, just a
That's
song.
awesome.
Thank you.
Well, was there a moment while you were teaching where it just kind of hit you, where you're like, okay, I'm missing a piece of what I'm meant to do?
I mean, no, I feel as though it's always been inside of me. Like, I've been performing. The first time I got on stage to perform was 7 years old. My uncle made me come up in front of like the church to sing, and he played guitar. And since then, I've been in like marching band. So that was also performing. And then when I moved to Missouri, I was looking for that outlet to still perform because I felt like I had it all in California. And then when I came here, I was like, where am I? I'm in the Midwest, and I'm like, what's there to do? So I later joined like this jazz band called the Upper Room Jazz Program. That's where I met the drummer that's in my band. And we would go out and perform at these different events. And then his mom told me about this community choir. And I was kind of like, I'm not really like trying to join a choir. I really just want to, perform. And she's like, trust me, you'll like it. You'll like it. I go out there to the performance. It was like their winter performance. And I was just blown away because it wasn't like your traditional where you're standing there with their binders. They are doing
strict.
dances. They're singing. They're doing all these little acts. And what got me was when they did their dance to Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror, because that's my favorite song of all time.
That's a great
And
song.
I was just like, I need to join this choir. So
That was
literally
the
since
moment.
then, exactly. Since then, I've just joined, auditioned, got in, and I've been performing all throughout high school and in college, doing music education, learning all of that. And then after that, I was just kind of at that point where it's like, this is what I dream of doing. I really want to get into performing. I don't see anything else for me I can't be in a classroom for so long. So I just took a chance on myself. I took a bet.
That's
And it's gotten
amazing.
me pretty far.
Nice. Yeah, a good run so far at this point, and things looking good ahead of you. That's a really cool picture though when I think of like you're 7 years old and your uncle brings you up on stage. You know, was it a thing he just threw it on you and pulled you up in church? Did he prepare you? Like what did you feel at 7 years old walking up for your first performance?
What did I feel? I mean, so to start off, everyone in my family knew I could sing. And it wasn't the first time the church heard me sing, because even prior to that, for the Christmas concert, I sang like Hark the Herald as a solo. So they
Gotcha.
heard me do that. And then later on, my uncle had this guitar at his old house, and I would be like, oh, I know this song. And so he was like, okay, sing it. And my voice was so high back then. I was like, one drop of blood that day. And, Christian song. And he was like, okay, like, I'm gonna have you sing it for the church. And to be honest, I wasn't nervous or anything, because it just felt like I was doing my normal thing when I'm singing along,
Right.
with the music. And so I was just kind of ready. I sang. People were like, oh my gosh, you have a beautiful voice. And I was like, thank you. So I felt like I was just ready to step into it,
That's awesome. That's
Thank
cool
you.
that out the gate you just knew like, yeah, this just fits. It's natural.
Yeah.
When you think about performing now,
Okay.
one thing in your bio, I noticed you talking about kind of redefining performance. And I was curious what that meant to you.
To me, what redefining performance means is more so bringing the audience in and making them feel like they're also part of the music making. Because most of the time, and I got this from one of my mentor teachers, where whenever we would teach kids how to do rhythm, right? A lot of kids, they don't get it the first time. So we make all these songs so that they can learn how to clap on beat for one, clap on 2 and 4. And then after that, we use the background music and everyone joining along as a carpet, so no one really feels as though they're out there by themselves.
Right.
And so with that, I've kind of taken that mentality into my performances. So which is why whenever I do like the crowd singing and the crowd interactions, I'm like, okay, let's try this all together. And I'll break everyone off into groups. And I'll be like, do a call and response. They sing it to me. And I'm like, perfect, good. Remember that note. Then we move to the next group. And you slowly break it down so that way they can understand it in its simple format. And then after that, you bring the full end result so that way they can be like, my gosh, I've had people come up to me and be like, I've never been in choir before and I don't really sing, but I really enjoyed myself in singing along. And I was like, thank you. That's good to hear, So I feel like as though I'm kind of bringing out the musician and everybody wherever I go to perform,
Yeah.
that they didn't know that was in there.
That's amazing. I love that because it's like you can go see great performers. There's great singers, so many, out there.
Mhm.
Like I'm just blown away time after time. I'm like, damn, there's great singers everywhere.
Exactly.
So like in a sense, like just singing really well or just playing really well, it's honestly not as memorable. And I think in that, like just in the sense of like, there's so many people who can execute, but then you creating like an environment like that, I think that's something that people are going to walk away. Then they remember like, oh, sang so good. It band killed it, but it was this experience, that they can take
Exactly.
home with them. That's really cool. And
Thank you. And that's
I
the
love
big
that too. It
thing.
can unlock, something in them too. Sorry, I cut you off
Exactly.
though.
No, it's okay. Like, that's the big thing. Whenever I do performances, I focus more so on the experience, right? Because to go back, one thing that my mentor told me of the boys and girls choir was that, like, really when you're on stage, yes, you are on stage, but it's not really about you. And so I was kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, if I'm on stage, everyone's
Of
watching
course,
me
it's
and,
about me.
they're listening to me. But if you think about it in life, right? Really everything we do is how we make the other people feel. And what we're doing is a service for everybody else. And it took me a while because I didn't catch it the first time. But after like a couple performances, that's when it really like clicked for me, where I'm like, okay, these people are here because they either want to escape from something, they want to enjoy themselves, or like they're probably going through something rough and they just really want that fun experience. And so I kind of look at it through that lens of, okay, what can I do to provide something for someone else? Like, how can I bring a smile and improve their lives and make it 10 times better than their day-to-day thing? So it's all about what I can do for somebody else.
That's awesome. I love that
Thank you.
perspective. It's easy to forget. I know for at least for me as a performer, that is the piece. Like, how do you draw people in? How do you connect with them? And I heard, I guess it was Ed Sheeran talking about like where his pedals and all these things kind of broke. And I guess like his show, I've seen him before, and it's all kind of reliant on this technology that he's doing all these crazy loops and everything. And it was interesting because he played the whole show like with his acoustic guitar, I guess, to an arena, which is wild, without all the loops, without everything. And, I'm sure a lot of people had a great experience, but they were asking, he was very frustrated. And I thought maybe he was frustrated because things broke and all that. But he said, no, I'm frustrated because people saved a ton of money and made this like their night to come see me. And I don't feel like I gave them the full thing that I could, and I was like, man, I love that perspective. It's always great to have that.
Exactly.
Now, as far as mentoring, it sounds like that's been a big piece, like mentors coming along for you. What does that look like right now? Do you have mentors as well who are helping you in the performance realm, helping you just in the life realm? Or are you now turning into the mentor to other people?
I feel like it's a mix of both. For my mentor, so my very first mentor was my band teacher back in 6th grade. And he helped me with like, when I was learning euphonium, he helped me like learn like how to read music and all this other stuff. And then once I left elementary school, I was like, oh my gosh, who do I turn to? Then I found somebody else, which was my jazz band teacher, Mr. Adame, who I'm very thankful because he's the one that really allowed me to have that outlet to go out and perform and be creative. And we started this after school jazz band. But middle school is only for like 2 years before you go into the next thing. So I'm like,
Right.
I move into high school. I'm like, who else do I have? And then I move here in 2015 and I'm like, now I don't know anybody. But as time went on, I'm finding that there's a little bit of mentors in like everybody. So with my choir director of the Kansas City Boys and Girls Choir, Mr. Ali, he was the one that always like helped me. He basically gave me like my artist development, and he helped me like know, how do I handle myself in a professional setting, where to go, who to connect with, what you should look out for, how to run your band and all this other stuff. But then he had a stroke back in 2021. And so here I am again with like, who do I run to?
Right.
Who am I going to? And that's when it opened my mind up of like, I just kind of have to go out into the world and, just get lessons from anybody, and find these people who can be my mentors. And I take what I've learned from the past and I mold it into myself. And I have this book. I have it written as life lessons. And I wrote down like everything that I can remember so that way I can like navigate through life. And I pretty much am now like mentoring myself. And if anyone else that's along with me on the journey, they've always been like, I see you as a mentor. And I'm like, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a big compliment. But I'm also trying to find a mentor still. So I'm just going through with life and I'm just learning. I'm taking each day as it comes. And I'm just reminding myself that I'm human. There is nothing new on this earth that hasn't happened to anyone before.
Right.
There's always experiences. And if I have a problem, I can always just go on YouTube or TikTok and find other people who have been through the same thing that I have. So to
That
answer
is
your
an amazing
question, I'm
part.
mentoring myself, but also finding mentors outside
Right.
of my physical self.
Well, and that's a huge piece too, because I feel like anywhere you go, if you're open to it, you can learn a lesson. Where it's like I've gone and seen terrible shows, and it was like I was like, I could still learn some lessons right here. This is not. Don't do this. Don't do that. I've seen incredible
Exactly.
performers, and I'm like taking notes, those kind of things. That's
Exactly.
It's interesting, this concept of mentoring yourself, because I recently started sharing with friends and family that I feel like my future self, like I have conversations with my future self, and my future self is like kind of raising me up in a sense.
Yes.
I felt crazy for thinking this, but like I literally have conversations with my future self. So that's kind of what that piece looks like for me. I do have mentors around me, but I hit this place maybe similar to you where it's like, no, now I need to like really start deciding, what is it you want? But I'm curious for you, mentoring yourself, what does that look like for you personally?
Mentoring myself, let's see. So I look at it in various different aspects. So I'll speak on the two of like when it comes to life in general and in the creative aspect. So when it comes to life in general, it's allowing myself to kind of experience things and allowing myself to make mistakes, which I know in life we're kind of like, don't do that. There's always just like, we're always on caution about what we do, where we go, all this other stuff. But I'm just kind of at this point where I'm allowing myself to kind of just go through these little things. And I think that's the big important piece because when I was in therapy, my therapist told me this. It's not about getting over something, it's moving through something.
I love that.
Right? Because you have to experience these things. And if you get over it, you might run into it again and then you're going to get tired of hopping over these walls.
That's
So it's kind of, you got to go through it and allow yourself to feel. And you can have like 3 good days in a row, but you can't be surprised if the 4th day is going to be bad. There's
like
ups
some
and
days
downs.
are shit. Some days you feel like shit, for like it just.
Exactly.
Right.
And so I just kind of take each day as it comes. I journal. I'm always watching these life coaching videos, and I also listen to a lot of like Oprah Super Soul sessions.
Oh, okay.
Because she
I didn't
brings
even
in
know that
all
was a
these,
thing.
yeah, she brings in all these like philosophers, and they're talking about life and different experiences. So I always just take that in. Now, from a creative aspect, I've been doing a lot of reading. One of them is The Creative Act by Rick Rubin.
Oh yeah, that was like my
And
Bible for about a year and a half, bro.
yes, and it's just like mentoring myself through there. I'm just taking in lessons that I've learned again from my mentor. And then also I'm kind of like thinking about Jamogi, the artist, years from now. Like, what would Jamogi, the artist, do? What would he do in a situation? Where would he go? How would he navigate through this? And so that's why at this point in my creative life right now and performing and networking and business side, I'm really cautious about what I do because I work so hard at what I do right now and I don't want to mess that up to where I end up messing things up for the future Jamogi.
Right.
So I'm constantly like, okay, let me make sure that I got this, make sure I'm prepared, and then just allowing myself to create and just making what I want rather than trying to make what other people expect me to do. I feel like I kind of went in a little loop, but
well, it is interesting because it sounds like you live almost in a tension of like, okay, there are some very specific things I have to get right. But then this reality of like living is also making mistakes and learning from them too. And that is a weird tension, right? Of life.
Because people think it's always just like one way.
Right.
But really, both things can be correct. At some moments you can still, as a music artist, just live an experience. But the big thing is when you know better, you do better. So whenever I experience something and I'm like, that wasn't right, I know for next time not to do this. And so now I can maneuver through it. And so I feel like I'm kind of setting myself up for like a good thing right now.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love it.
Thank you.
It is interesting because, yeah, I think that's something that honestly doesn't get talked about enough of like learning to mentor yourself, learning to put yourself, like see yourself in the future and then let that future person make the decision that's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I feel, at least maybe it's like the culture I came from was so heavily into like mentorship that it almost became debilitating, like in retrospect, because I noticed I had this like incessant need to get confirmation from somebody about a thing where it's like, that development for me was that piece of learning to say, no, this is what I actually want. And and I'll ride on it. I'll throw the dice. And if it's fucked up, it's on me,
exactly.
as well, it's like, and I can accept that too. But yeah, but then there is a power. Like I'm grateful for so many of my mentors because they've helped me like kind of navigate certain things that probably kept my ass out of trouble too, so it's a weird place. Yeah.
I like what you said about when you were seeking like confirmation from things. Cause I feel like, that's something I've also experienced when in college, I started off with vocal performance, meaning like opera. Right.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to classical music, you got to do things on the note. You got to make sure your rhythm is correct and you got to make sure your timing's right, pitch is correct. I remember one time in our French diction class, no, in our Italian diction class, I went up there to sing a song, an art song. I can't remember what it was. And I just wanted to kind of spice it up a little bit and add a bit of like what I was hearing. So I added like one little run in there, short, simple run. And the teacher, she stops and she said, "What are you doing?" And I looked at her, I'm like, "Oh, I'm just like singing." And she's like, "That's not in the music." And I was like,
You're like,
"Oh, okay."
it is. I hear it.
Right. But I was kind of like, okay. So since then, because of
Right.
that experience, I was like, so like, I need to make sure I'm so on point with everything, every single note. But it felt like I was pulling myself back because I couldn't experience anything and I couldn't be present in the moment, like because I'm so focused on making sure things are right. So once I finally let go of that mentality, I'm like, I feel more freer than ever. So yeah, just what you said about looking for confirmation on things. That's what resonated with me and brought that memory up.
Yeah, where it's like after a while, I feel like when you look at even self-help books, leadership books, I read as much as I can in all that world. I love that stuff. I listen to so many different people, but it's like one day it like hit me. I was like, it all like equals zero in the end. Like, because there'll be some person who's like, it's this, and some person says the opposite thing. And it's like, I had a recent thing where two producers that are in my life that I trust a ton, both of them extremely accomplished. And I sent them a track for feedback, and they both gave me literally complete opposite like feedback.
Oh
like
my
one literally
gosh.
said, "Don't do this." The other one said, "Do exactly this." And I was like, okay. And both of them were right. That I'm sure if one of them mixed it, it would have been great. If the other one mixed it the way he wanted to, it would have been great. But that's where it was like, okay, it's yet another reminder of like, I have
What
to
do
sit
you
back.
want?
Yeah. And say, am I happy with this? And I was like, I'm not. So I'm going to fix it the way that, I'm going to take from this, take from that, and figure out until I'm happy with this.
Exactly.
It's tough, man.
It's tough, which is why whenever I used to send music out, I would have 5 different people, 3 people, 1 classical trained person, 1 person who's just like more so a church musician, the other one is just like for pop, and then the other 2 people are just like your normal, regular music listeners. And I'll get feedback from each of those people so I can see like what things they have similarly and what's different. But I pay more attention to the people who aren't musically trained or anything because they're listening to it with like no judgment in mind and just listening to it as it is. And they provide a lot more feedback. And the music is really for that listener. So I'm going to listen to what they're doing and I'm going to listen to what the other 3 are saying as well. And I'm going to take bits and pieces. But once I like get the information that I need, I'm like, okay, let's see. This is my data. What do I want to do now?
Right.
So yeah.
And again, it's probably that great tension of living in that, because it's like, you got to be happy with it. Like, for example, I did 2 different masters on a track I was working on recently. And there was one, I was like, this just doesn't sound right. And the other one sounds good, but I wasn't 100% sure. And I actually pulled my boys into the office, and only one of them's really into music. But I just wanted to see kind of like your average music listener, like, what did they think? And, it's like, yeah, you take in all the information, but you still got to shake it up and then decide at the end.
Exactly.
So it's a weird tension. And especially in this creative world, I feel like the best artists, the ones that I look up to the most, seem to be that person who is like, I hear you, I'm going this way.
So who are those artists?
For better or worse,
Yeah.
Well, honestly, the one that comes up a lot on this podcast is Kanye West. Love him or hate him,
he is really good at what he does.
It's fucking brilliant. And I think even his downfall in life comes down to this like unadulterated like authenticity, like to the detriment of his own personal life at this point, which hopefully that can be a lesson for all of us too. Like, if you have you seen his Genius, the documentary?
I have, yes.
That, like, watching that, I was almost in tears at the end, but you see this downfall, but it is like, that's the power of his artistry as well, because he was just willing to go out in realms and do things that no one, would have done. Like, he influenced so much of pop music to this day. Like, I was looping last night at a live show, and I was doing like a Kanye beat underneath I was like playing around with this extra, like even last night looping acoustic guitar at a bar, I was still
My
hearing that.
gosh.
But yeah, I would say Kanye is probably one of the most influential producers around for me. So yeah. And he's kind of also a warning to make sure you surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a good warning as we talk about making your own choices to also still keep bringing in people you trust.
Exactly.
To say, hey, you're about to walk off a cliff, bro. Maybe we need to talk.
You need those people. Those people for me was my high school teacher, Miss Mercer. I remember one time, like, I don't know if you know, but in choir, there's these things called district and state competitions.
Yep.
And you have your solos and whatnot. So for solos, because I moved to KC during my sophomore year, I got a 1 at district, 1 at state, all 3 years that I was here. And so my head started getting a little too big one day. And she pulled me to the side and she said, if you don't watch yourself, you're going to fall on your ass. And she like laid down on me. And I was just like, I was like, girl, what? Like, I was just more so, she said ass in front of me. And I was like, in
You're
school?
like,
But,
she
but
had to
what
get
said
true.
was, exactly.
She had to get true to you.
And, and that was like the biggest thing where she checked me. And I'm so glad she did. And I tell her this every time we have a phone call. I'm like, Miss Mercer, thank you so much for putting me in check. Because if you did not do that and you would have let me go on, I would have been so egotistical and like, I don't know what I'd be doing right now. Because I feel like that would change the whole trajectory of where I'm at right now. So, always just having someone to keep you in check.
Keep you grounded, and I
Exactly.
think for Kanye, it seems like for Kanye, it was his mom. She was the only one who was keeping him anywhere near like grounded. And
Right.
it seemed like once she passed, like then
it went downhill.
He went fully, full Kanye.
Yeah. Full Kanye mode. Yay mode.
But yeah, I would say he's probably definitely like just from production, which is funny because Run With It, I don't do rap. Like we don't sound like that, but there's our song Ghost Like You. We were sitting in writing it, Daniel and I was like, Black Skinhead, when it's like doing this kind of thing. He's like, oh, I'm with you. I was like, that's what I'm feeling. And he's like, okay, like this. And that rock song, like the basic beat is actually from like, that's where it started, like his use of toms and in that album, that whole album, and it's good. How about for you? What's an artist that inspires you in production or performing or whatever it is?
My gosh. I have a lot. So Michael is a big one, mostly because Michael Jackson, because my mom said that when I was still in the womb, she would take the headphones and play Michael Jackson, put it on her stomach, and I'll be moving around. I don't know how true that is, but I'm just like, all right.
You're already dancing.
Really, exactly.
In the womb.
Literally. But like, he's someone that I look up to. I also look up to like a lot of like Prince when it comes to production. But mostly when it comes to Prince, it's more so on the terms of ownership and creating without like feeling held down to stuff. Enoch, who's an underground artist, is another one that I look up to. I just love the way how he makes his vocals are so sultry, but his harmonies are very like intense. It's hard to explain.
Enoch?
Yeah.
What you said, I'm gonna look that up as we're talking so I don't forget.
He's someone that's really good. Music. Of course, I also listen to like who else? I also admire the way how some artists, their like how they sustain their legacy. For example, I know Beyonce's one, because I'm just amazed with the fact that like you started out in 1999 and here in 2025, you're still here. Right. But on top of that, none of the albums really sound the same. And still I like that because it's like, it's like allowing yourself to create and just venture into different genres. So I really admire and respect that. Who else inspires me? I feel like that I get inspiration from a whole bunch of people. Yeah. But when it comes to performances, I'm very big on like entertainers, especially entertainers from the past. So I study a lot of like videos from like James Brown, Jackie Wilson, Tina Turner. I look at a lot of Bruno Mars, B, of course. I also looked at, So I'm constantly studying like what they do. And I take notes of what they do. And I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is how I also want to do it. Now, how do I take that, incorporate it, and make it into my own thing?
That's
So
awesome.
it's a lot of studying, but they always said, study the greats and become greater. So
Oh, yeah.
that's what I try to do.
Well, I've heard there was ever since I've heard this or read it as an interview of someone I was friends with in a paper, and they were asking about his influences, and he said he was a self-made artist, and that was his answer. And I wanted to reach through the paper and shake him. Like I was like, "What
Because there's
are you
more.
talking about? Like you got like no way. Like you just randomly learn how to play guitar, randomly learn how to do songs and write. Like, bro,
Exactly. There's always somebody there that inspires us all. And I feel like
Yeah.
everybody tries to do this, especially when it comes to like, oh, like, what genre are you? Right? Which is a big one because a lot of
that can
artists
be a
are
tough
like,
one, right?
yeah. And a lot of artists are like, I don't like to put myself in a box and da da da. Which I understand. I
Right.
understand exactly what they're saying. But to somebody else, that does not help at all. Because
That's
so you
true.
got to kind of compare yourself just a smidget. Be like, that's why I always respond with, well, I say that my music kind of sounds like a little bit of Bruno Mars mixed with some Tank and the Bangas, but imagine them in the summertime at a block party. So it's kind of like creating that visual
That's
and that
great.
sound for them.
Yeah.
So that helped me a lot. And so, but yeah, there's
I
always
love that.
somebody.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, it is tough. I always struggle with that for years. And even now it's kind of like this learning lesson as we engage. One time it was really helpful. We had radio people review. We were part of like this public review thing where they just would listen to a track. They didn't know who it was and they just give their, honest opinions on it.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily everyone was like vibing with it and they're rocking. And then they said indie pop. And me and my keyboardist just looked at each other, I guess, and we're like, I guess we're indie pop. I don't know. Sure. I was like, let's go with it.
Okay. Yeah. Just take it and
Yeah,
just be like,
we're just
okay.
gonna go with that. In the production world, are you fully producing your songs and like from start to finish? What does that process look like?
So for my first project, the Age of Aquarius EP, and I thought the previous song, which was Anymore, those are ones that I produced all on my own. I like to have reference tracks. So I'll pick out like my favorite songs and I'll write down like, okay, what do I like about this song? I like the way the beat feels. And I'm someone that I love to listen to stems.
Yeah.
So I'll go on YouTube and I'm listening to like stems. For example, when I was looking for Scream by Michael, I listened, I think it was like 30 minutes or something. And I was just listening and soaking it all in because I was like, okay, this is what I want to find out what they did, how they did that. What does that sound like by itself?
That's a great idea, by the way, because I'll do
Thank
reference
you.
tracks, but I did not think to pull the stems to like really zero in. Like,
Exactly.
okay. Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that.
So I listen to the stems, I write it down, and I go in there and I kind of start producing, and after I send it off to someone to mix and get all of that done. Okay. But I also know the importance of collaboration, and I don't want to get stuck in one sound like forever. Because, after a certain point, things start sounding the same. For example, like when you hear a Pharrell song, it's a Pharrell song because of that that intro. And so I'm kind of like, I want to start working with different producers to kind of start pulling in different sounds and like bringing something new and fresh. So the person I'm working with right now, his name is Gianni. He's based out in Florida. And when we start producing, I see his screen and I'll be like, okay, Gianni, this is kind of like what I'm feeling like. I'm feeling something like so-and-so. And I'll show him like the vision board that I have. And I'm like, I want to make sure like the sound kind of fits this vision. Mm-hmm. And so he's like, okay, cool. And so like he'll start playing, for example, with the song Hot Block that I have. He got the bass line where it's like boom, dum, ba dum, 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 da 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 dum, dum. I'm like, okay, I like that. And I'll tell him I like that.
Like, keep that going.
Exactly. And so I'll be like, okay, now at this point, we need to start bringing in things here. We need to make sure that when it gets to the chorus, that it really blooms, So I always give him those pointers. And I always tell him, like, feel free to add in what you want. If there's something that I'm not a fan of, I'll just be like, let's take that out and look for something different. And so that's pretty much how I collaborate now. And if there's one song that we were working on and he was like going through and I stopped him midway and I was like, Gianni, I love your work. You already know that. But to be honest, this feels like the other song. And I'm like, do you agree with that? Because it's collaboration. So I want to make sure we're communicating. And I said, do you agree with that? He's like, well, no, not really. And I said, well, why? He gave me his points. And I said, okay. And, I acknowledge and I'm like, I hear exactly what you're saying and I can
Right.
see what you're saying. But to me, when I'm envisioning all of this gives me part 2 of this previous song. And let's see if we can kind of like do something else or go on a different venture.
Right.
And because I said that and advocated for myself too, we came out with this other song, which is Go Big or Go Home. And then I was like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
yeah.
This is, we already did that thing. Let's do this
Yeah,
fresh thing. That's really
exactly.
cool. The collaboration piece. Like, it's funny because we're kind of doing the opposite route. So we started always working with producers, and I
Mhm.
love that perspective. And I plan down the road to bring in producers again, but we're actually switching to doing all self-production in-house
Mhm.
as a band. So yeah, we're kind of flipping it around
Yeah.
at this point, but part of it is just more from a strategy because we're trying to put out a lot of music here very soon, and financially and just like time wise, it's like, okay, we got to learn to really kick these babies out
Yeah.
and do all the things, and then
Exactly.
ideally though we'll get some more money coming from that, and then we can finally afford to bring back producers and move that kind of volume. Because yeah, it's like we're trying to go for quality and quantity now at this point, just for some of our own goals. But
Yeah.
man, the power of a producer, I think I wouldn't feel the confidence I feel now. Like here, I'm pointing at my computer because right here is where I'm writing and mixing, doing all that without spending a decade working with one of the main producers I worked with. His name's Josh Gleave. And without spending that time in the studio and getting the feedback back and forth and hashing things out and subtle arguments, those kind of things. Like, I learned so much. I don't think I could even try to venture out if not for that. So yeah, any artists who are out there, if you haven't worked with a producer yet, give it a go. Find one you love what they do. That's important though.
Yes.
Listen to their shit, make sure it's on because everyone's got their own sound, but
Exactly.
because they will bring their colors into it, and you got to make sure that you like their
Exactly.
palette.
Yeah, and it's like, and my big thing is like emphasis on producer. So, and this is just my views and my thoughts on it. I personally see that there's a difference between a beat maker and then the producer, right? Because I have so many people that will reach out and they're like, oh, like, I feel like this one would fit you and da da da. And I'm like, okay, well, let me hear it. And it's something that I'm like, where it brings the question of, one, have you listened to like my previous music to see if that would really work? And it's like, I'm like, maybe it's something that I can do down the line, but as of right now, this isn't just a direction where I'm currently going. And so whenever I'm working with producers, I'm always just like, okay, I want to find someone who also knows their instrument, which is huge, but also like where we can communicate. So if they're like, I can be like, can you put it in the key of F major, please? Or maybe we should vamp this specific section. Oh, can we do like some key changes here? Can you change like the chord progression here? Can you invert it just a little bit? That's just kind of what I look for. So if you're a beat maker and you're watching, do your thing. Like,
Right.
great, amazing.
But
I
it's a
just know
different
for
animal.
me, yeah. I just know for me, I feel more comfortable when it's someone that's like knows their instrument and can like help bring what I hear in my head to life.
It is, watching great producers at work, even my friend Josh, it's like one part psychology, one part, leadership, one part creativity, one part technical build. Like, it's all these things that you have to embody, I think, to be a great producer and work with other artists. And yeah, that's not something you just stumble into. You got to really develop that and be willing to have those conversations. I tell a story all the time where it's like the band, one time, it was last January, we were in Nashville recording with Josh. We get in we were like all arguing. There's like 2 or 3 different arguments going throughout the whole thing. And Josh just spins around. He's in another, like in the control room. He just yells, "Everyone shut the fuck up and sit down." And we all,
Right. Let me do what I'm here to do.
he got us all. He's like, "Okay, first thing."
Yeah.
He's like, "You're arguing about this. We're going to make a decision kind of bring it in." But he just knew, like, it's not even really like his character to like cuss people out. He was just like, I knew I had to put a stop to what was happening so we could actually create something great here, guys. It was really cool. The hard conversations, right?
Okay.
I feel like Alex Hormozy is a guy I quote a lot on here, as business author, that kind of thing. and he's like, your success is just like one hard conversation away. Or like he often says something about those hard conversations, how often we don't see the things we want because we're not willing to have these hard conversations. And in your stories, I feel like you seem to have a really strong command of being able to like push back with people, but like in a loving way, to kind of like, at least from your conversations, it sounds like you're very skilled at having tough conversations with people to make sure your vision is carried out. I'm curious, is that something that you've had to like consciously develop? Or is that something that's just been, that's who you were even at 7 when you were performing? You also had some tough you're like, and I don't like that piano beat over there. Like, what did that develop? Where did that develop for you?
Okay, so it is something that I've had to learn, and I have watched my mentor because he was the CEO of the Boys and Girls Choir. And we would be in board meetings, and I really watched him on how he negotiated. And especially when it comes to letting people know what it is and what you want, you know? And so once he was kind of like, once he had a stroke and it was me by myself, at some moments, you know, I would be like, oh, that's okay. Like, you know, yeah, that's fine. Let's make it work. But that was doing nothing for me. And
You're just getting mad later, right?
yeah,
Later on, you're like, why
exactly.
are they still doing that? Oh yeah, I didn't tell them.
Yeah, because I enabled it. And I remember watching this video of when it comes to business, being nice and business do not mix. You know, I can be fair and I can be fair, but being nice, no. Because what I've been like watching in these documentaries and all these like YouTube interviews of and the books that I've read, there's a lot of sharks out here, you know, and especially when it comes to the music business. And you really have to have your business set up to where it's on point, or else when you go in there, you know, you're gonna just be handed a contract, and if that you're having all these obligations that you didn't want in the first place, like these 360 contracts and all the other stuff. And so
they're like, guess what? We want everything.
exactly. And so how I put it is where whenever it comes to having tough conversations, I'm like, if this is what I want to do, this is what I like. If I want to make it in this business or continue doing this, I need to be able to do this. And this isn't me coming out of a place of being nasty or mean spirited. This is just what works for right now. And at this time, this just doesn't work. For example, when I had to like let people out of the band, you know, because every now and then, you know, sometimes things change, visions change, and people's obligations change. And so what I'll do is like, hey, first off, thank you for your time, you know, because you put in a lot of time to this, you know, and I let them know that their work is valid. Like I see what they're doing. However, at this moment, I'm noticing this, you know, and I just think that right now, this just isn't the best fit. And I always end the message with like, you know, this is not coming out of a place of being negative. This is just more so business. And, you know, when it comes to band members, and this is something that I'm seeing a lot, and I have some people who may disagree with it, but at the end of the day, this is what I believe. When it comes to band members and you're the band leader, you need to draw a line between friendship and actually being the leader and the business person. And I think the biggest downfall from what I've seen repetitively from different bands is that they think that everyone has to be friends and you got to operate on a friendship level. But when it comes to have the like hard conversations, they can't do it because now the other person is just looking at you like, oh, you're just saying this as a friend. Like, you know, there's all these other issues that start popping up and you don't know how to approach that person. So with my band members, do I believe we're friends? Yes, I do believe we're friends, and I would love to hang out with them. But I kind of draw that line. I don't ask about their personal business. I don't really like dive into like their anything personal they got going on. Because one, it's none of my business. And you know, like if you broke up with somebody, that is none of my business. I'm sorry that happened to you. But rehearsal is Wednesday from 7 to 9. Let me know if you can make it. You know, and it's like I just have this is what I'm focused on. You know, outside of rehearsal, sure, we can run and do a couple things and whatnot, but I'm just more so, I watch myself. You know, I don't drink at all. I have like a few cups of wine every now and then, but when I'm out with like band members, I don't drink at all because I'm just kind of like, like, I don't know, I'm just kind of watching myself, you know, and how I speak to them in a professional way. And I always want to make sure that what we're doing right now is professional. Every now and then we'll do like little jokes and whatnot, but then I'm like, all right, let's bring it back in. I feel like I'm kind of talking in circles, but my main point is you have to draw the line between friendship and business. And again, what I've said before, you can be fair, but you cannot be nice.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I could see how this would be controversial, especially in the band world. But it is interesting to me because so kind of back to that thing of different advice from different people. I'm more the opposite in some regards, but there's downfalls, there's pitfalls that I think you're highlighting very clearly, because I've seen in myself, I've seen it in a lot of other bands. I feel like it's what holds a lot of, like, for lack of a better term, local bands back from going on the road, learning to make money from tour, all these kind of things. Is you get it always usually starts with a bunch of friends in a basement.
Yeah.
And at some point you got to have those hard conversations, and it is tough. It's tough. Like, I've literally fired friends, like fired like a best friend.
Yeah.
And that shit's
it's
hard. And most people aren't willing to walk that road, And so, like, for me, I've just concluded, because there was a time where I did more, like, I finally just had to separate it. And I've led in like nonprofits and that kind of stuff too. But for me, I realized my own style is I really do want to get connected. So I'm actually very cautious of who I let in.
Yeah.
Just because, like, I want to be friends with these folks. I cannot not be friends with them in that regard. But having to walk that line of also casting vision and saying, this is where we're going. And
exactly,
ideally everybody is coming along, and when they're not, having those conversations, and the hardest part is firing. And I don't think a lot of band leaders are out there on a local level, or maybe even regional level, are not. Oh yeah. I remember when I told someone, you're like, you fired a drummer's like, yeah, it wasn't working.
Exactly.
And,
it's just
like,
not a
we
right
went to lunch, we tried to coach through it, said, hey, I noticed this, kind of like you said, I noticed this, and this. I'd like us to work on that because it's holding us back from doing X, Y, Z. And then over time, it just never got there. So it's like, at some point, you either choosing to stay where you're at and never progress,
right,
or you're releasing them to go do what he was a better fit for a different style of music than what we were doing, essentially, what it was. I was like, in the jazz world and the blues world, you'd be fucking killing it. Like, we're in the pop rock, everything has to be exactly on.
Like,
this, like that, like the same snare hit every single night, all these kind of things. But yeah, that's a tough line to walk. And I think I've seen leaders do it the way you're doing as well. You also have a much bigger band. From what I've seen, like some of your stuff, where when you start bringing in horns, you start bringing in, backup dancers and singers, like at some point, like for us, it's like our core five, and then we have like tech people, like come in. It's like, but at some point, it probably gets too big to where you can't really be that close to everybody either. So it is an interesting, that's an interesting point, even though I think we fall on different ends of that. But it sounds like, I feel like we very much agree, like, you have to put yourself in a position that you can have hard conversations with people to move forward, or else you're not going to get anywhere.
Right. For example, which I'm going to tell this, Micah, if you're watching this, like, I'm sorry, he's the drummer in our band. So we had this studio session. Now, we didn't pay for it. It was the saxophonist was like, hey, like, this is for a class and da-da-da. I said, okay, cool. I gave everyone a time to be there. And I said, please be here at this time. If there's anything else, please communicate with me beforehand. Otherwise, I will not answer my phone after a certain time. So I'm already setting the line right there. Like, do not text. So everyone is there, but Micah, the drummer. And we can't get started until Micah gets there. I mean, we really can, but I would prefer that everyone was there. So I get a call like a few minutes later. He's like, hey, can I have a ride? And I was just like, I said, are you calling me now and asking me this? And he was like, I said, you better find someone else that can get you there. And so, and I was irritated, but I still kind of made sure I kind of conducted myself, because at the end of the day, this is something that it's my vision at the end of the day, and he's contributing to it. So I still want to make sure I'm being respectful as well, but also, like, you should have been here at this time. Or if you knew this was happening, should have been ready. So 30 minutes or 45 minutes later, he arrives and he's talking to everybody and he's like slowly getting set up in the drum room. And I remember I was like walking back and forth. I'm like, why are we not ready to start? Thinking to myself. So then I go and I look, he's over there talking to somebody. So I opened that door. I said, we are waiting for you. And he just looked he looked at me. He just got quiet. He got quiet. And then he was just like, he just started getting set up. And it wasn't in a way to be nasty, but it was like, hey, we were supposed to start at this time. We are now behind because you came in late.
Right.
And with you talking, we're going to be even more late. And we only have this studio for a certain amount of time. We could have been like on the third or fourth run through for the song. So I need you to kind of pick up the pace. And so it was just very
when
direct.
You're renting.
Right. So it's very straight to the point, but I feel like he understood where I was coming from.
Right.
It wasn't a place for me to scold him, but it was just like, you got to be on top of things. So Micah, again, I love you. You're my brother. You're amazing.
He's like, bro, why'd you have to tell that story?
Right.
He's like, I'm sure
But
there's other stories.
And it's just stuff like that. And when it comes to talking in the rehearsals, I as well I bring it down because I'm like, y'all, we got rehearsal time from this amount of time. We need to stay focused. Yeah. We got breaks for a reason.
There has to be someone who keeps things on track and keeps things moving forward. That's what I've seen so many times, especially with artists. It's hard where there was a season I was leading a team of about 50 different artists in 3 different locations doing all this kind of thing as different kind of world and run with it. And I just realized it's like herding cats, and most artists are in their own worlds there. And so it's like, I had to create this other side of my brain where it's like, I can't be like the oozy, emotional artist right now. Guys, we one time I remember working with a drummer during that season. He was one of our drummers that would rotate. And during sound check, he was hitting just quarters on a snare over and over. And he was working with the sound guy. And finally I walked up to him, I was like, bro, I appreciate a great sounding snare, but we got everything else to check and we got to be rolling in 20 minutes. What are you doing?
Exactly. Oh,
I really do
gosh.
appreciate and want the snare to be great, but we got shit to do.
Exactly.
But I think that is a huge lesson, man, just for anyone out there who's doing music or really if anything, you got to be willing to have those hard conversations, all the way down to marriage, if that's for somebody, it's you're going to have hard conversations. If you don't, you're just going to be stagnant. You're going to be stuck.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. So I just realized it's almost over time. I've been having a great conversation.
Yeah. I'm enjoying myself. Shoot.
Yeah. I looked down. I was like, oh man, how is it already almost an hour? But so let me get to the last 2 questions.
Okay.
Before we pop off here. Right now, how would you define right now, how would you define living a great life?
How I would define living a great life? Well, first things first, I feel as though I am currently living in it because I am in a space where I am now doing what I want to do without regrets. It's something that a lot of more seasoned people have continuously told me. They're always like, I wish I would have done this when I was that, and I'm like, I take that in mind. So I'm in a stage right now where I'm doing what I want to do. I know what I want to do, and I have an idea of how to get there, and I want to make sure that I get there. So being able to just continue doing what I'm doing right now without stressing about the other woes of the world, and I think that's just the main thing. Doing what I want to do, have very few regrets. That's how I would define it.
And for the last one, right now, how would you define creating great things?
Trial by error. Sometimes not everything you do is going to be great. Not everything you write is going to be phenomenal. You're not always going to have a phenomenal show. What matters the most is really how you bounce back from it. I think there's a lot of people that seek that external validation to keep them going. But I am a firm believer that if you have a strong core belief in yourself, very Disney, right? But if you believe in yourself 100%, you can keep going. You know, like, think about all the people who have been successful. You know, you had the Wright brothers when they're trying to do like the whole airplane. People were laughing at them and being like, you can't fly. People can't fly, all this other stuff. And now look at us. We're flying. Now some planes are exploding right now, but we're still
Can't win 'em all.
flying. Exactly. You had Walt Disney. You had people that were trying to insult someone's intelligence that they had to go to court just to prove it. And it's just like, if you believe in yourself 100%, everything you do, especially when it comes to your creativeness, you'll always be successful. And when you're in a constant state of practice, you will never fail. I feel like there's so many that I want to say because I have, like, again, a book of so many different things. But those are my top 3. You got to believe in yourself, be in a constant state of practice, and just experience things. Don't take yourself so seriously right now. Like, allow yourself to just live. I don't know if that answered it, but if it did, I'm glad.
Hey, I think it works. Well, and that idea too, that not everything's going to be perfect. Not everything's going to be like this big moment. In fact, one thing we've been talking about in our band is that, when things that seem big are popping up, it's like, well, this is really cool. We should celebrate it. But it's just the next step. It's just the next piece. It's like, and that's going to build and that's going to build. Because sometimes it's like we prop up like, oh, this is going to change everything. And it might not, but like moving forward and doing step by step, that will, no matter what, change things.
Have you seen the movie Soul?
Think so.
It's a Disney movie.
Yeah, I don't think so.
It speaks directly about that. I'll give a short summary.
Okay.
There's this jazz teacher. He's stuck in teaching right now, but he wants to be this big time jazz artist. However, he gets the call where he can finally like reach that dream. He dies basically, and his soul is like stuck in a cat, all this other stuff. He finally comes back to life. He gets his soul back into his body. And he's playing at these jazz clubs with this big jazz saxophonist. And at the end of the performance, he's talking to Dorothea, who's the jazz saxophonist. He's like, I've been like waiting for this moment my whole life. And I really thought that things would be like a little bit different. And she gave him the story, which is where, there was this fish that was out in the sea. And he came up to this other fish and he's like, I'm trying to find the ocean. And the other fish was like, the ocean? You're in it right now. And the little fish was like, this is water. I'm trying to find the ocean. Like, we're already doing what we want to do.
Right.
You got to just live in it. Like, every moment that comes up, thank you so much. Just know that if you're an artist, you're currently doing that right now.
Right.
If you're a musician, you're currently doing it. You don't have to be on a stage on Coachella just to finally feel as though you're officially that. That's already what you are. We are so much bigger than the stages we perform on, but I feel like we put so much emphasis on the stage itself that we belittle ourselves just for it. So just knowing that right now, we are what we currently dream of being.
That's huge. I'll have to check that movie out. That's funny. Like, I'm in the ocean. And
Yeah.
I'm smiling too because we have a song that we're recording right now. It's called The Whole Damn Ocean. And the only way we've all talked about it is like, I don't fully know what the song is about. Most of our songs are very specific. Like, it's about this thing and paints this one was just one of those emotive, like all we can explain is like, it's like a feeling,
Mhm.
and it makes me want to watch that movie and be like, I don't know, maybe this is what that song's about. I don't
Right.
like, cause it is like that. It's that idea of like being wrapped up in like completely in a feeling and in water. So I got sidetracked, but it just made me wonder. I was like,
Yeah.
maybe I'll figure out what that means, from that
Time
movie.
will come.
That's huge though. We talk about iterations in our band as well. Like, each little piece builds on the next piece.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's painful. Sometimes that's hard, but it's worth it. Well, let everyone know how they can connect with you, check out your music, all that good stuff.
Hello, everybody. I am Jamogi Bridges. That is Jamogi. It is not Jamoji. So just want to throw that out there. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at jamogi.bridges. On Facebook, it is just Jamogi Bridges. And if you want to connect or book us or anything like that, you can just send an email at jamogimusic@gmail.com. And on Spotify and all streaming platforms, just type in Jamogi and I'll pop up right there.
It's true. You pop right up. It's awesome. And it's great stuff, man.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for making the time, man.
Of course. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Live and Create podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment or a review.
The Live and Create podcast.